Bert, when he asked me to come along, said, "What you can talk about anything under land, work and technology." So I am going to talk anything. But as Viv has indicated, what I sort of took actually from Mel's speech about saying resilience is important, and looking at how Trurra can make sure it's future-proof. As from my position as an economic development professional in Cornwall Development Company, which you may know is the delivery arm of Cornwall Council. It's wholly owned, and so therefore we do a lot of activity in terms of delivering that economic activity. So it's about fund management and making sure that businesses access that funding, that development happens, because there is obviously a difference between cost and value, and so forth. So we are very active in that sector, and therefore from my perspective I'm looking 5 years, 10 years ahead, if you like, in terms of how places can ensure that they don't sort of fall into a trap of looking at the fact that they try and sort of protect the place that they live and enjoy without sort of responding to changes that are occurring. And I think we're in a place now where there's some significant disruptive forces that are going to impact us all in the UK, in Europe, across the globe, because we're in a global market now. And also I want to just say that I come at this from two aspects really. One, as a resident, I've been living in Truro since 2006, all bar 1 year, and I was given a visa to go and live at Morland Smith, but I came back as the visa ran out. That's right, yeah, they didn't like me there in the Red Lion. So I've lived here as a resident. I've been living here, and obviously some of the points that Mel has made about living close to Newham and being a resident there, you know, chimes quite accurately. And I can sort of, living there next door to an industrial estate has its issues, because indeed you can't have the two working alongside one another. So what I want to do in terms of the talk tonight is sort of outline, put some context, if you like, in terms of how Truro should future-proof itself going forward. I think it has what does resilience mean, if you like, in terms of how that might be evidenced on the ground. I'd like to sort of look back briefly, because that sometimes helps us what we've done previously, and certainly I'm not looking back into history, I'm just looking back into my sort of recent past, if you like, in terms of when I started in 2006 in the last structural funds programme of the European programme Convergence, and how things haven't happened and why they haven't happened, and also looking at a framework for going forward, and the fact that there are some opportunities out there which can help facilitate a framework for change. And then some final thoughts, if you like, to hopefully engender some discussion and questions later on. So, what are the drivers, for change? And I looked at a report fairly recently, picked it up purely by chance, and actually found it was quite helpful in terms of trying to frame those, because ultimately, whilst we all think we're sort of isolated or insulated from it, we will be impacted in one way or another. So it's useful to sort of take the Institute of Public and Policy research document that calls itself a future-proof report, if you like, looking to 2030. And I just want to sort of pick out some points there that they picked out in terms of major disruptive forces that will have an impact across the UK primarily. Obviously, we've got a demographic tipping point. I think everyone who reads the paper is obviously very familiar that we've got an ageing population, and of course the imposition of that in terms of how we currently utilise that ageing population and the impacts obviously on the infrastructure that supports it. that is a factor that we have to address more smartly. You've got obviously a changing economic order. I mean, it's interesting viewing this that actually, with India and China and the United States, you can see the shift, tectonic plate shift, if you like, in terms of the world economy eastwards, if you like, looking at it from that direction. And of course you've got Russia in between, so you've got that shift. You've got a Brexit aftershock. Of course we don't know what it's likely to be, but we are leaving the European Union, and therefore what is that going to have during 2020s to 2030? Obviously that has political, economic and trading issues that we're not clear on. It's uncertain, and therefore it will have an impact. Tectonic technological shift, so it's the impact of technology and the way we work, how we communicate, how we consume, and that's at all levels. That's obviously both personal and at government levels have got to change, and that's local government as much as central government. And of course we're in a decarbonisation age as well, obviously with climate change, energy consumption, transport, air quality, and trying to meet all the challenges of what they call the Anthropocene age that we're now in, that epoch where man obviously impacts everything and has a great influence on it. So Britain is at the periphery of that, that's what I'm saying. So obviously Cornwall's at the periphery of Britain, and obviously Truro there. So there will be an impact on that. I think that's what I want to get out of that, really. So we've got to look at that and say, well, okay, what's that mean for us? Standing here tonight, sitting here, living here, and so some just interesting statistics that come out of that. That 60% of this is across the UK, so it will have an impact in Truro. 60% of retail jobs are forecast to go by 2030. Impact on our town centres. So where are they going to go? How are they going to be re-employed? You've got obviously the opportunity for becoming a so-called smart city. Well, I'm not sure what that means really, but I think is that super-fast broadband, everyone more better communications? Is that a different way of living, a different way of responding to how we live in a city? And how does that affect the economy? We've got a state mechanism that will be under strain because its structures are, have been built and acquired and assembled over many years. They've got to change, and that takes a lot of time to put into effect. And of course, that's the political influence there as well in terms of government, and family and intergenerational strain as well in terms of housing, family, and how we locate with one another, how we locate with our family. I live down here, but my home is in Devon, for example. I'm not the only example of that, but the thing is ultimately that just puts a strain on the family relationships, etc., etc. So, but that's a factor of economic life these days. The thing is that because we own our houses, we're lucky enough to own our houses, there is that fix, if you like, that we have to work with. We can't always move houses and change jobs because it's been bloody difficult to do that. So what does resilience mean? Again, looking at a report called the 100 Resilient Cities report, I'll just read this out for you if I may, which is quite good. It's the capacity of individuals, communities, institutions, businesses and systems within the city to survive, adapt and grow no matter what chronic stresses and acute shocks they experience. That sounds quite dramatic really, doesn't it? And the thing is that some large cities in the world, and let's look about obviously across the world, 100 global cities, the nearest one that formed part of that was Bristol. A large number of them, of course, are areas of massive climate issues in terms of flooding and obviously extreme changes in weather. So obviously we don't see that necessarily down here, but what I want to do is to sort of take how they measured that was sort of saying, well, is their infrastructure able to cope? What about the housing in the city, and is that broad enough, if you like, to take care of all interested parties in terms of keeping the city an active and thriving place. In terms of economic development opportunities, so we've got to keep the economy thriving in the city. What about public safety, and how does the people who live here interact? Technology, obviously positive and potentially negative, in terms of smart cities becoming, very much sort of fully connected, and yet obviously the security issues around hacking and that sort of thing. Can it survive if our systems are hacked and we can't access our electricity bills or anything like that, or indeed a TSB, for example. So it's both a positive and a negative there. So I think we've got to sort of think differently and challenge the norms, if you like, or what we would believe to be the norms. And I think that's about embracing change in an incremental and planned way, which I'll come on to. So in terms of looking back, very briefly, I think in terms of, I joined in 2006, I joined CDC in 2009, and we immediately got involved in the strategic investment framework that Trurra developed as one of the business plans for investment for the convergence funding, part of the European structural funds. And that was a fully engaged and consultative exercise. We came up with a plan of various interventions, but when you look back between that period of 2010 to 2014 and 15, very little has changed really in terms of what has been delivered on the ground. And I think the lesson learned there is that things change takes time, and the other thing is that it was just a list of stuff that we needed to do rather than a planned framework of what we wanted to do. First of all, in order to deal with the 390 and all the traffic that comes in on the 390, for example, dealing with our infrastructure, our sewage infrastructure, for example, that exists in Higher Town that was inadequately installed back then and had to be retrofitted. So there's some, obviously, going back to the points about infrastructure, there was a plan then for 5 years of potential funding. Trurra had the opportunity of securing circa £10 million of ERDF at that time, and actually, unfortunately, very little was delivered here as a result. And I think the lesson learned there is, I think it's about, you may have the best laid plans, but it's actually about delivery and how you deliver those and what you want to deliver first. So that's what I'll take from sort of looking back. So what are the opportunities, I think? Because I think Truro is in a good place at the moment. There are a number of things that are offering that. It's one we're meeting tonight, which I think has been part of the Thinkin Trurra process, driven by opportunities that exist. The council's taken some decisions to invest in some major sites, which will have a transformational effect on Truro, and therefore has implications as to how we invest across the city. As a result, the council's taken the decision to invest £600 million in terms of an investment programme. That's phenomenal in my view. It's a very brave and bold decision. It's local money for Cornwall. Previously, certainly from my perspective, I've been managed a number of funds, national funds and European funds, which of course all been written pretty much outside Cornwall, for Cornwall, and we wonder why we don't quite hit the nail on the head. So this time we have an opportunity, and I think Thinkin Trurra has a great there's a great opportunity of framing exactly what it sees the city to be in 2030, and framing that. And I think it's not about necessarily having a sparkling vision, but actually a plan for change, both thinking large and thinking small, the right balance going forward, and by spending some time on getting that right is well worth it. What you don't want is to be pressured into doing something before it's been well thought through. That's not to say to be, put off, procrastinate, and just keep on talking. It's about being able to do that as well. So, some I don't know what the timing is like, but some final thoughts actually, if I may. Sort of observations and looking sort of forward, if you like. I think my suggestions are that we need to think big and long term, but also small and short term. So it's about big and small interventions, because big interventions are all the ones that we are attracted to because we think that they are going to have the transformation effect that we want. But equally, you can do some small stuff as well, which equally has that local and game-changing effect in terms of the town and the city. And I think Trurra is a great place for those smaller places, those interactions between obviously smaller streets and cut-throughs and rat runs, if I can use that term. And there's some great opportunities there if we're smart and clever about how we do that investment. I think it's key that we know how to deliver what we plan. That's the other thing as well, is that we come up with loads of plans, but they just sit on the shelf gathering dust if we don't understand how we're going to actually deliver that investment and those interventions. And I think the critical thing is to have a plan and a framework to work to and to change and to be flexible and review over the next period. And 5 years is not long enough. You need to be looking 10 to 2030, which obviously the local plan does, but equally it's not granular enough, if you like, as far as the city is concerned. And that's really where you and we come in to help you define that. So those are my thoughts, and I suppose my final. So what we need to do is to change Thinking Trurra to Doing Trurra, and Carpe Diem, I think, is the watch phrase for the evening.